Welcome to Shop Talks. Shop Talks is a presentation of the In Kitchen. Check it out. Our YouTube channel has all this video. It will be up eventually, and there's 200 other ones. Free information for people who actually know what they're talking about. That's our specialty. Also, lots of information written at inkitchen.com. Get sponsors that make all this free. Emerald, the people who put the show on and sponsor this. Her Solutions. You ever heard of them, Gary? Yeah, Stalls and Los Angeles Apparel. I have my two friends here, Stan Banks and Gary Cantor. Stan has a YouTube channel, T-shirt Side Hustle and other enterprises. And Gary Cantor is one of the technical sales reps at Hirsch, specializing in embroidery in particular. And we're going to talk a little...
Also a shop in New York with 28 heads.
Yes, I forgot about that part. Yes. And Stan has his own printing shop now as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about financing. No one likes talking about it. Everyone has to talk about it. So we're going to get into a little bit maybe how you might bootstrap, how you might, maybe some of the larger purchases, how they can be done. Both of them have worked with people from having a tiny hand press or heat press to people that have probably hundreds of heads of embroidery, right, and screen printing equipment. So they both worked with all kinds of things. We'll have them talk a little bit about some of the options, and then we'll have time for questions. All right.
So welcome. Am I on? Yep. As Rick had mentioned, I'm an embroiderer over...
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So my name's Gary. I'm an embroiderer over 30 years. We have a shop in Long Beach, New York. Run about 28 heads. Also a sales rep for Hirsch. Carry primarily Tajima embroidery equipment, direct to garment through Brother and Mamaki, some other equipment. And I guess today we're talking about financing and how you're going to get up and get started and where you're going to get the money to get this very expensive equipment. And we'll quickly breeze through the fact that none of us have rich relatives that are going to finance us or have won the lottery. So where does the money come from and what do you really need? And typically there are options out there. They're somewhat limited. Some are better than others. A lot of it has to do with what kind of credit score you can show. Starting probably from the bottom, people try to acquire small business loans. It's a long, drawn-out process. Typically does not end well. It's not as favorable as people might think. Banks are a good option as far as what you're going to pay back, as far as your interest is going to be. The problem with banks are that they don't understand this industry. And you may have a relationship with a bank. You might say, I go in there, they know my name, they always greet me. But you're going to go in and borrow money for equipment. Chances are you may deal with the person you know, but he's not the guy who's going to approve your loan. It's going to go to a district manager, a regional manager, up to corporate. They want to know, where are you getting your business from? Where is the return on investment? What are you going to charge per piece? How is it? So there are a lot of questions, and many of them don't even relate to the business. And you can go through this for literally 6 months or better, and at the end wind up with no financing. So if you can get a quick loan from the bank, typically your interest rate would be less. You could pay it off in less time and save interest. But that does not always work. And so the most common way to acquire funding for equipment would be through leasing companies. And there are many of them out there, some of them a little bit shady, others not so much so. But leasing, it's not like leasing a car where you're buying equipment, you lease it for 3 years, and then you give the equipment back. This is typically lease to own. Very important that you read the terms of the of the contract you're going to sign with them. Typically, it's 1 to 5 years. It's based often on your credit, on perhaps a few months of banking statements, on your years in business, and your personal credit score. They will tie all that together, and the rates will be higher than what you can expect to pay at a bank. But what they do bring to the table that all these others do not is they will approve you very quickly. They make money on your money, and so they want to approve you. The lower your credit score, the less time in business, the more interest they're going to pay you. So typically, it's going to be a 1 to 5 year lease with a buyout at the end. So at the end, you don't turn the equipment back, you buy it out. And your buyout is typically either $1 or 10% of what you borrowed. And obviously, $1 sounds better, but these people are not idiots. They make money on your money, and so if you opt for $1 buyback, they're going to charge you more every month. Important that you read the terms. I've had people over the years, although it's becoming less common, I've had people that have signed up with leasing companies that the lease never ends. So you keep paying as long as you keep using that equipment. When you're done using that equipment, you give the equipment back. That is not a good lease. That's not what you want to get involved in. Your goal is to ultimately pay it off and own the equipment outright.
So, you mentioned a couple things like reading it carefully. What are some typical things that can be in there? I can think of a few that are not good.
Yeah, there are things in there. It's a lot of legalese in there. You may not be familiar with it. If you're not, it is best to have somebody who might be able to interpret it. If you go with some lesser-known leasing companies, you often will wind up with a poorer situation. So very careful how you decide to sign up for this, because they own the equipment until it's paid off. Which brings me to another point: is that with a lease, suppose you borrow $25,000 to start your business. Well, you're not paying $25 back. You're paying $25 plus their interest, and over 5 years, that could approach $35,000 or more. But what it does do is it puts you in a monthly payment. So if you don't have the capital to start, you can get involved with a leasing company, puts you in a monthly payment, but your overall payment will be more over time. Now, these payments are a write-off on any profit that you have in the business, but really important, especially as you start out, that you don't take a bigger lease than you can possibly pay off on a monthly basis. I believe, and I believe we've done this before with Sam mentioned, that you want to try to get the best possible equipment. You don't want to buy cheap equipment. Cheap equipment will give you poor results. Your business grows by the product that's out there. Once your product leaves the door and people are wearing it, that's your advertising. That's what people say, where did you get that shirt? Who did the embroidery on that hat? They see lousy embroidery. They don't care where you got it. They don't want it. So important to get good equipment, not to take a loan that you cannot pay off on a monthly basis, and maybe you want to have the capital in place for the first few months that you're starting out and trying to get rolling, learning the equipment, so that you're not stressed out. You don't want to be stressed out. You need to know what your monthly nut will be. Your monthly nut will include your salary, all of your overhead. That's your rent, your insurance, any lease payment, everything together. You want to figure out what you're going to have to pay every month to to be in this business, you want to cut that by 4 so you know what your weekly payment is. You want to break it down to a daily payment and all the way down to an hour. How much is it going to cost me to be in this shop every hour just so I can make this payment? And that's the only way. You'll often hear people say, well, what do I charge? Well, you know, the common thing is, we charge $1 per 1,000 stitches. Well, that couldn't be more wrong. It's right for maybe 3% of the people out there. Everybody's situation is different. You have to figure out what your hourly shop cost is going to be, and that does include all your insurance, your utilities, your overhead. Important to keep your overhead low in the beginning, so again, that you're not stressed out. And then you can figure out, well, what do I need to charge? Well, here's a guy that comes in with 10 hats. You know you need to make $40 an hour to cover your monthly costs, and then you can figure out, well, I'm going to make 10 hats an hour. This is what I gotta get, and this is what your payments will be. Now, sometimes, especially in the beginning, you will get some bottom feeders in there, and you're going to say, well, I need to charge you $7 per hat to embroider this hat. And the guy's going to say, well, you know, my budget is, and it's less. Or, you know, there's a guy that'll do it for that. Now, if your machines are not busy, then you may consider working for less just to get the income in, just to keep the machines running, just to get a new customer in, to get the ball rolling. And ultimately, as the business grows, you kick those bottom-feeding customers to the side, or you raise the prices on them until you can make a good living. So the first couple of months can be a little tough. Hopefully you can have the capital to cover those lean months in the beginning. And this is a great business. I mean, it's nationally, it's I don't even know what the numbers are, but it is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Everybody can make a living in this industry. Screen printing, embroidery, direct-to-garment, direct-to-film. All you're doing is you're taking what people are passionate about and putting it on a shirt, a hat, or a jacket, so you could walk around and say, look, I was in Barcelona, or I love fishing. You know, you put a striped bass on a hat and put Bob on it, and the guy thinks you're a hero, and he walks around and he goes on a fishing boat, and the fishing boat wants to know, where'd you get the hat? Now you're doing the fishing boat. Somebody goes fishing on the boat and he works for IBM, and now you're doing IBM. So it goes everywhere. Your work is your advertising, and that brings me back to get the best equipment that you can possibly afford. Don't buy the cheapest equipment. It's not the right way to go. Cheap equipment is typically going to cause you aggravation. It's going to give you poor quality, and it's not going to grow your business. And you're going to wind up getting rid of that equipment and buying better equipment down the road.
I thought you were going to end with you should go fishing. No?
And, right. Well, that comes on the other side. You know, so when you finally have made it, you can go fishing, and you can wear a hat that that has your name.
We're going to pivot to how you can maybe bootstrap from the beginning, but Gary, just one other thing about leases. I know a big surprise is that you might think, oh, the lease is bad, but I'll pay it off. A lot of times you can't, right?
Okay, so that is a good point. So with a lease, so you get a loan from a bank, you want to pay it off early, you save all the interest in it, that's great. With a lease, you can't do that. You have already signed up, say for argument's sake, you're borrowing 25. In the lease, it says you'll be paying back 35 over 5 years. If you want to pay it off early, that's up to you. You're still going to pay 35. You don't save any money by paying a lease off early. Sometimes a leasing company will work with you, and they will give you something off. But usually what you sign up for is what you're going to pay back. So there's no incentive to pay it back early. A loan, there is incentive to pay it back early, but it's more difficult to get a loan starting out a business than it is a lease. So keep that in mind as well. Once you sign a lease, you're locked in for the term of that lease, and you've got to pay that every month, or pay it off early, but for the same amount that you've agreed to originally.
Stan, so I want to get into business. I'm passionate about it, and I got no money. What do I do?
Well, it's going to be determine what you're going to start with. I think today we're very, very fortunate about the technology and the number of people who have already invested in the technology in order for you to get started. So what that means is finding places, vendors. As you guys know, we're at the show, so there's a bunch of transfer vendors here, starting with something small in order to build it up. We just heard from Vlad, who started with 15-cent transfers and now has $1 million shop with automatic equipment. So finding places local to you will be better. If you can possibly find some local printers who are able to do some work for you. Myself, I started out contract printing, which will allow you to sell the goods but not do any other work until you have the customer base, which I recommend you have before you go out and lease equipment in the first place. So what that ends up meaning is as you get started, if you're able to sell, find customers, start to build up the business, you'll have a ground floor of what you've been able to make over a certain amount of time. So when you talk about finding your nut and understanding what the cost is going to be for you to operate and run your business, you're going to look at the customer base that you have. Well, how many shirts have I done over the last 6 months per month? All right, and then that number may be greater, may be small, but if it's 1,000 and you need to make $5,000 a month in order to crack the nut, right? So you're able to divide the number of shirts and you'll know the cost per shirt that you need to add on top of your cost of goods before you even make any profit. So understanding the nut and all of that kind of stuff is going to go into it, but we have access to vendors, to embroiderers where you can contract print. Maybe find him, he'll print for $1 1,000 stitches, and you can go and turn that around for $2.50, depending on the quantity or higher per 1,000 stitches, based on your customer base and who you're selling to.
So how do you finance those first shirt purchases? That's got to be a tough one for a lot of people, right? You finally get a big order. What do you do?
Require 50% deposit up front. And you should be charging enough that 50% allows you to actually buy the garment. Sometimes we got our prices so low that a deposit doesn't even cover our costs, right? So if it's costing you $3 a shirt and you're printing it at $5, that deposit is going to actually not cover the full amount that you're actually charging or purchasing your shirts for. So your pricing should kind of indicate that as well. You want to be, maybe you got to take a 75% deposit instead because you're not really charging enough, but you definitely want to require a deposit up front, which should at least cover the cost of goods. That's even if you're doing transfers on top of the shirt. So put that together. I want the customer to at least pay that up front, and sometimes it's not always available. So if you get into some schools, you get on terms, net 30, that can turn into net 60, net 120 days at times. And these are just the things that you want to consider.
Sometimes the equipment companies will finance the equipment. Is that right? At certain times.
That's a good point. That's true.
I know, like Brother had a deal like for a couple years
for
ago, right?
argument's sake, Brother right now on certain items, they'll give you 0% financing. Not to everybody. They're looking for top tier 720 score or better. They want a couple of months of banking statements. That's about it, and that's a great deal because you're playing with the manufacturer's money, and they're putting their product and their money where their mouth is. So they want you to be successful. They will finance it. They will finance it at 0%. But you got to be careful because getting back to what I said earlier about buying cheap equipment, you'll also find vendors that sell cheap equipment, poorly functioning equipment, they also have partnered with somebody that will give you 0%. That's how they get you to buy inexpensive equipment. Well, look, the equipment's less expensive and it's 0%. But you know what? You're in a bad situation, and you can't get out of it. And so you got to be careful. Do your homework. Make sure you speak to either other operators of the same equipment. Get online. See what people say. There are forums for virtually everything, and naturally, forums, for what they are. Don't look at the best review because the best review is usually me, and don't look for the worst review because the worst review will be my competitor. But the truth is somewhere in the middle. You'll find people that are using the equipment, the problems they have, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and then speak to the representatives and see how you feel. Are there service people in the area? What happens if you have a problem? Is there phone tech support? Things along that line. So there's a few factors, but not too much that you'll get overwhelmed. Find a piece of equipment that you want to get started with it, whether it's screen printing, direct-to-garment, embroidery. Research who's out there, what kind of financing is available from the manufacturer, if at all, and if not, then you start with the leasing companies or a bank or what have you. Find out who will get you the best deal. And with the leasing companies, you're paying to borrow money. So it doesn't matter who you use, who's giving you the best rate over time, and make sure there's an out for you at the end. That your buyout, you own that equipment. That's.
Also, you know what you were saying about good equipment. It's probably the worst feeling, or one of the worst feelings, to buy something that you're still paying for after it doesn't work anymore.
I think they call that buyer's remorse, and that happens very quickly when you go, how come I can't do hats? How come the screen printing press doesn't register?
But you're still making that payment.
Right, but the payment is still there. The payment does not go away. So buy good equipment, even though it's costing you more. It would be a short-sighted approach to buy cheap equipment because you're going to be stuck and you're going to sour on the business. Like I said, this business is great. You're making things that apply to everybody. Everybody's passionate about something. You're just taking what they're passionate about and putting it on some sort of textile product that they could run around and show people what their passion is. It applies to virtually everybody you meet. It's really, and often this can be done out of your home to start with, so you can keep your overhead low. You just got to speak to people, let them know you're doing what you're doing. Wear embroidery, wear screen printing. Let them know that you've made it yourself, and that's your business. And you'll see that things month over month, year over year grow to the point where you don't have to talk it up. You're at the point where you're turning business away or you're growing, whatever it might be.
You touched earlier about the SBA. What can go wrong with SBA loans? I think that's a good one to know.
SBA,
what can go wrong?
It's not so much that it goes wrong. It's just it never goes right. You just don't get the loan, and it's
also one of the loans that you cannot get out of, right? Bankruptcy.
Yeah, you can't. Right. I don't think you can bankrupt yourself against it. You're in it if you get the loan, and they're difficult to get. They're not that easy. And I've been selling equipment over 20 years, and I could probably count the number of times I've seen an SBA loan come through on one hand. It's just not the most common way to get financing. Leasing by far and away is the most common, but not the cheapest. So something to keep in mind. It's necessary for most people. Probably 70% or better of what I sell goes through leasing companies. So they do finance. They finance quickly. They'll get you in business. So that's probably the most common.
Stan, what are some of the mistakes you see people make when they're trying to finance things? Like, what do they spend their money on wrong, or what kind of sources do they go that lead to a lot of trouble?
I think one of the biggest things that people do wrong is they don't consider the rest of the stuff, right? Like, we only try to finance the big piece of equipment, but we don't consider the fact that you need a set of 50 screens, you need to get your inks, you need to get everything else to get started. We only look at the cost of the big piece of equipment when getting started, which is, you can quickly find that, you buy something for $15,000 and you still need to put another $5,000 into it because of the other supplies that goes into getting it going. And I think the second thing is not getting the right equipment, right? Not understanding where you want to be. It's like getting your first building. It's like you buy a building that you think you need, and then you put all the stuff in there and you quickly realize that you don't have enough space. So understanding where you want to go, what that projection is, what direction you want to go in your business. And the only way to kind of get an idea of that when you're starting out is to sit and be around other shop owners and figure out where you want to end up in that process and take recommendations from those people. A salesperson is only going to try to sell you kind of whatever they can get you into. But when you sit around and you go to some of these other events, these happy hours, and you talk to people in business who have been in business for a while, and you get an idea where you want to end up 5 years from now, you can kind of backtrack with where you want to be. So talking to people about this process, how they got where they got, what they would recommend you get, and where you would start, what equipment they're using, and different things like that. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've got to experience over the last 3 years following, and now getting back into it, is the fact that I have made all these connections with people, understanding the different business models, and really having an idea where I want to be in this business. So make sure you pick the right equipment. And what he said is true. Going with cheaper equipment. Go with if you're going to finance something, go with something that, even if things don't work out, it has a resale value. So you get some of the bigger brands, and you talking, if you're in embroidery, you're looking at Barrington, Tajima, SWF, some of the bigger brands that are built into it, they're going to have a better resale value than buying something that isn't literally, it's like a car. You drive a car off the lot, depreciation hits you right as soon as you drive it off the lot. So it's the same thing with this equipment. Or last but not least, you can look to buy used. So if you don't have the budget and you can pull some money together, you can buy some good used equipment. And if you're buying some of the reputable brands out here, those options will actually give you they'll give you a machine that's going to run and last forever, because they're built to do so.
What about a couple other ways that people use, but what's the good and the bad of it? Borrowing from family and credit cards. What are you seeing out there? Because you guys see a lot of people, so you hear stories. How does that work out? Plus and minus.
I have some people around me that are well off, and I just don't want to work for them. It's like you get some money from somebody, and the next thing you know is like their job is the utmost important job, and it never actually ends. So I'm always cautious about taking money from people around me. Just because of that nature, especially if they want to be in it and they're not going to put in the effort to actually be a part of the business. Because, it's one thing to buy some equipment, but to actually run the business and be a part of it, like, I want a strategic partner. Like, what part of this are you going to help me with? If it's marketing, if it's actually going to be the production side. So that's just something that I've always kind of like, I'm much rather just bootstrap, start small, and then try to grow it from there.
I think also you want to not borrow from someone that can't afford not to get paid back. It's always a risk, no matter what happens. I mean, maybe you break your leg, or maybe you're not just a bad business person, you got some bad luck. And if you can't pay that person, and they're going to be up the creek. I mean, I had people come to me that want to start a clothing line. You bring their grandma in there, and she can't afford it, and she believes in them, but you don't want to put that person in that spot,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So there's something else that I didn't mention that people do, not highly recommended, but if you're fortunate enough to be a property owner, you have a home equity line of credit, people do use that. That is cheap interest rate. However, if you speak to your accountant, they probably will discourage you. You don't want to tie your business to your home, and I'm guilty of doing that myself. I think on my second embroidery machine, didn't have the necessary funds to get all of it, and I just wrote a home equity check, and then my accountant went somewhat berserk. What am I doing? I'm tying my home to my business. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to lose my home over a piece of equipment. I'll make sure that it's paid off. So that is another way that people do finance and keep it in-house and keep it cheap enough. Also, it is also a deduction on your taxes. And no matter what you decide to do, if you have an accountant, it's certainly to your benefit to run all of this past them, because they are the financial experts. They may not necessarily have the right answer. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do to get into the business, but it certainly does not hurt to have somebody else hear your plan and see what because there might be things that you're not thinking about. But that's certainly another thing to consider as well.
I think you're probably crazy if you only think you're going to be successful. You got to also think about what will happen. Are you going to lose your house?
In this business, you're not going to lose your house. No matter what, don't lose your house. That's very important. And you'll lose your house if you're buying too much equipment. You're not making your monthly nut. Make sure you're within that. Everybody here can be successful in this industry, regardless of what you decide to do. There's great opportunity here. It's insatiable. It never seems to end. And it's just a matter, people, when I started, I remember my salesman said, I said, well, I just spent $45,000 on embroidery equipment. Where am I going to get my first customer from? And the guy said, you got to find your niche. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He goes, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to do schools? You're going to do bars and restaurants? You're going to do sports? And so for the first week, I ran around going, yeah, what's my niche? This is really important because whatever I decide, it's what my future is going to be. And it turns out that I decided, you know what, my niche is embroidery. If you need embroidery, I'm your guy. Doesn't matter whether you're a school or a bar or a restaurant. You're a manufacturer. You take all jobs. And when people are trying to lowball you, take the job in the beginning, keep your equipment running. It's like I say, if your machinery is not making noise, then you can't buy any toys. You got to keep your equipment running, and you want to, keep that pump primed and keep manufacturing, and ultimately you'll get better paying work if you're not getting it right off the bat. Obviously, if you're a middle person, you already have a book of business, it makes it a lot easier. If you're starting out, doesn't really matter. You're gonna find the business. Just got to let people know what you're doing and show them the quality work that you can do. And the business seems to come. I mean, I started out of my house. We have no web presence. No marketing, no advertising, no sign out front. We're as busy as we could possibly be. It's all word of mouth, because the key is do it on time, because if they give you a deadline, there's a reason they need it for a certain time. Get the job done. Do quality work. Well, if you buy decent equipment, the equipment will do the quality work for you. And then
Spoken like an embroiderer, not a screen printer.
And then, yeah, right. I mean, there's a little variability between the different media, but price it accordingly. You don't want to be the cheapest. You don't want to be the most expensive. Just find out what the market is and price it somewhere in the middle. It's all you have to do. It's those three main things: quality, on time, and price accordingly. That's really all you need to focus on. And where's the business going to come from? And don't get frustrated the first week you're not getting a lot of business. It happens. Even when you're busy, you'll find, hey, February's a dead month, but the next year February's a busy month. And every year that you grow, all those dead spots fill in until you're stressed out, like all of us up here. So it's
Stan, any more words on this, and then maybe we'll do questions.
I had something, but it slipped my mind.
All right. Well, if you think of it, say it. All right. Any questions out there about financing?
all right.
That's all right. Anything.
Back to the booth.
All right. So he has no workers. All right. So he has a lot of equipment, but he can't find workers. Okay.
I think our entire industry is struggling from this one way or another, and I think it's more important now to find the work for us, and then having all the equipment. That means you might need to connect with other people who are selling, and specifically to be able to keep the machines running. But if you don't have the staff to run the machines, it's getting you're gonna have to run them yourself until you can kind of slowly bring people in. I think it's gotten so easy to get into this industry that people forget it's actually a trade, and so finding the right staff to run it, you're gonna have to educate people and grow them yourself, and just find them in situations. I learned something from somebody from a company here that was very prominent. He told me he liked to hire people that worked in fast food because they're used to pressing the buttons and they're used to the pace of what they're doing. And I'm not in that position to hire, but it was like one of the things that was really profound in what he did. And you look at the type of employees that he hired, they were good staff workers. Hey, yeah, and they'll love your pay. So
yeah, I was gonna say they're paid crappy. That's a good thing too. You have to be creative sometimes. We were talking to somebody on one of the shop talks, and they have classes for people to teach them screen printing or embroidery, and then some of the people in the class really took to it and they hired them. So
Yeah, something else to be careful about. There's really nothing you could do about it. Is that you're going to hire people, they're going to learn how to run your equipment, and guess what? They're going to call me and they're going to buy equipment and they're going to go out on their own. Happens all the time. So not much you could do about it. You know, there are no non-competes anymore. It's the way of the world. You know, everybody sees when they're in it, wow, this guy's doing it, he's making a fortune, I could do the same thing, why can't I do it? And it does happen. It's very, very common. So, yeah, can't tell you where you're going to get people, but you got to get them. Yeah.
Follow up? Sure. So the question, I'll repeat. So the question is, after 3 years, he's got all the equipment and he's working hard, but he has no money.
Without knowing, and I know you're up by Ellenville in that area. I spoke to you before. You might have grown too fast. You might have bought too much equipment. You might have your overhead maybe too high. It might be time to downsize. You have quality equipment. You might sell a few pieces of equipment. Move to a different area. It's hard to say. Everybody's situation's a little different. I'm still going to say it's very viable, and with the web, it is a flat planet. We sell embroidery to. We have a hotel in Switzerland. Why would they come to us? We're in New York. We don't need. There's thousands of people that do the same work between Switzerland and New York, but somehow they found us and we're doing their work. So it may not necessarily matter. I mean, you'll get more business if you're in a denser area, but if you want to spend some money on marketing and placement on the web, work will still come your way. Who's going to run those machines? Sadly, that would be you for a while until those people show up. That's a hard answer. I don't know. I don't know.
Another question here.
You guys mentioned buying secondhand equipment. So just an FYI, because that's how I started. And did not know enough for how many stitches are already on this machine. And whether all of the needles, like a 16-needle machine, all operate the same. So when I went in and he showed me that the machine worked great, yes, he did. But then when I went to inspect it, because the machine kept losing registration, I found out, well, the machine has a shitload number of stitches on it, and needed a new.
So the comment is that as for secondhand equipment, she went and bought a piece of equipment, showed it working. When the whole thing was working, it didn't work so great, but you had already bought it.
Yeah, that happens.
I would just say you got the order wrong there. You should have had the tech in to check it probably before you bought it.
Yeah, there's it depends on the equipment. With embroidery equipment, if you're buying used equipment, I would say keep it within 10 years. You don't want anything older than that. And it still goes back to quality equipment. Even if, so for argument's sake, I use Tajima. The equipment's not in good working order. It could be made to be in good working order. But you may spend a decent amount of money to the point where, you should have bought something new in the first place because it wound up costing. The last person who runs it, if they didn't oil it, if they didn't maintain it, how do you know that? If you could find out the tech that they used or did not use, you'll get some insight. That, sadly, and sorry to hear, is a misstep. Right, and they will get it. They will get it back up and running.
All right. Other question?
Right. Well, right. Well, glad to see you moved along because that will happen. And so again, it comes back to I'm starting out. I'm only going to spend $3,000. Well, you know what? You're going to have more difficulty than somebody that took a risk and bought a new piece of high quality equipment because you have warranties and you have guarantees, and you won't get that with used. Often with used, why is the guy selling it? And if you look deep enough, you're often buying somebody else's problem.
But it depends on you too. I mean, if you can fix things yourself, that makes a big difference. Or if you have a techie
But if you knew,
person
how would
working
you
for
know how to fix it
exactly.
yourself?
You would not. No.
Yeah.
The sales and everything with our business is great. But as far as like, I'm stuck in as far as like doing a lot of personalized. Like I do a lot of stuff with individuals.
All right. So you want to repeat that question?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So the question is, you're doing a lot of personalized work, and you want to change the type of work that you're doing. Yeah. But you're trying to get more bulk orders and different things like that. I think there's a bunch of different ways that you can get listed for vendors. Every state is going to be different. So like in our area, you have to register to be on the school's vendors list and different things like that. And today, I mean, I think the personalized market is kind of where everybody is going. It's just going to come down to how you're doing it. But that work would also lead you to kind of like finding bigger work or larger jobs. And I think we all try to do this catch-all marketing where I do embroidery, I do this, I do that. So going out and putting together some specific campaigns for the type of work that you want, a specific flyer to go to schools and to take into schools or to send somebody into schools geared towards school work. So letting them know that you can help them with fundraisers, and you can let them know that you're capable of doing bulk work. One of the things that I often say to people is the work you show is the work you get. So if you're showing a lot of custom work, you're probably going to get a lot of custom work because that's the work that they see that you put. Now, what you just said is you don't necessarily want to get rid of them, right? But that doesn't mean you have to show it as much. So putting together some different marketing that will probably gear towards the type of work you want, corporate, schools, and then putting together some very, very specific things, and then going backwards and working from there and trying to figure out how you can get in front of the right person. The hardest thing with schools is figuring out who makes the decisions, because every school, it may be the principal over here, maybe a guidance counselor, and then they got the different little pockets. But if you start with some of the smaller stuff that doesn't get love, then you can probably work your way into it. So I have a few schools in Philadelphia that I print for, and I just did like the teacher appreciation stuff. And this year they do the school wears uniforms, and I'm like, the lady who ordered the teacher appreciation stuff, I'm like, well, who's doing the uniforms? Like, who's responsible for ordering that? So I can kind of lead myself into the other types of work that I would like to get.
You're probably lucky that you're doing personalization work. The business is kind of slow now, but I think that area, he kind of touched on it, is actually doing well. And you're definitely true. We used to show really complicated stuff in our samples, which we're good at, but then people thought we didn't want to do simple things. So, if you only, like he said, if you only show your personalization stuff, they're going to think that's all you want to do. So.
Hey, I'm running back to my booth.
Okay.
All right. All right, how about a hand for Gary Cantor?
Hey, thank you.
Busy booth.
All right, other questions? All right. Oh, here we go.
How do you, for somebody who's starting off, how do you go from something in your basement to a bigger company? Is it more marketing? What would you recommend?
All right, the question is how you go from your basement to a shop, something like that.
Yeah, sure. It's definitely going to have to do with the marketing, right? But I think finding your niche, right? Like figuring out the pocket of customer that you would like to have, and kind of getting really, really specific. So I've been working now to try to figure out service-based businesses a lot more and kind of finding that predictable work. A lot of us sit around and wait for things that come in the door. And it's trying to find work that's going to be consistent. Every school year you can count on schools at the beginning of the year. You can count on sports or certain seasons that you actually hit into. But finding customers that are ordered repeatedly in order to allow you to kind of grow, right? When we're just taking a bunch of custom orders from random people and we're not really tracking where that stuff is coming from, I think that gives us like that inconsistency that doesn't allow us to grow. We're not sure if the next decision is going to be the right decision. But marketing, of course, and how you gear everything up to your order flow. So how you gear up customers, where you finding them from, and then how they matriculate through the business. And one of the most underrated things is just asking your customers for referrals. So if you do great work for somebody and they enjoy it, they like it, and it's the type of customer that you want, it's a big enough order, well, do you know anybody else who could possibly send me an order. Is there anything that I could do? Give back credits and different things. Like a lot of the larger shops are doing loyalty programs and things that we don't think about as a small business. But there's some room in there to do some of that other stuff.
And actually, a thing that Stan has said before, and I'll say it though, is to have like more work than you can do, and actually contract it out, so that and you can even be honest about it. Like you should be honest about it. I'm going to send work to you. When I get enough, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to expand. But you know what? Even when you expand, you're not going to be able to do it all, and you're still going to send them work eventually. But you don't want to make that break and then have to find customers. I find that most people fail and are miserable that do that. They rent that shop, get the equipment, and then think they're going to get customers, and it should have been the other way around.
Yeah, I think one of the things I like to tell people to consider is like, how do I make this a service, right? Like the way you stop competing on price and you're able to charge is like, I want you to come to me because you see the quality of work. That means I don't lead with pricing. I don't have a price matrix on the website and different things like that. And so looking at how I can make this a service, and that doesn't mean that you have to do everything. You may never do embroidery. I still don't do embroidery, but I'm able to outsource it and sell it because I have that. So allowing that work to come in and not having to say no to it. I mean, I think we can say yes a lot easier because of DTF and different things like that. But that's also the things that allow you to make your business a service, which will allow the work to flow consistently and eventually allow you to grow.
I think don't be afraid to sell on your own personality too. A lot of people don't care where they buy their t-shirts. They just want their t-shirts. If you do them okay and do them on time and they like you, they'll keep ordering from you. They don't care. So do that too. All right. Other questions? There we go. All right, so the question is the structure of your company, I guess, like when you want to go from individual to a full-fledged business.
I don't think it really matters. I don't. So I always say this, and I think you should consult somebody more professionally qualified. But I don't think there's a liability in printing T-shirts as far as like you delivering them to your customer. In that sense, like what's going to happen? They're going to catch on fire, and then they're going to sue you because their shirt caught on fire and they got burned, right? But in general, because of that, you don't have to go too deep into LLCs. It's all going to come down to personal finance and how big the business is, and then how you ultimately want to get paid from it and like handle your taxes. So if you're in your house, you don't have to jump through hoops. You can do a DBA, something as simple as a DBA to get yourself started, and then you realize you're making a lot of money. One thing I think people they jump to getting this stuff, getting the LLC and all that stuff, and then they don't make any money, but that technically it costs you money to even go down that path. So it just depends on your growth pattern and where you end up being, and then who's going to file and do your taxes and how you want to report some of the stuff that you're expensing off in order to get started.
Yeah, that's an accountant question. Your accountant, not just a general accounting. All right, Stan, you're going to hang around for a few minutes.
Yep.
If people have other questions, Gary that was here is in the Hirsch booth up in the front. Thank you for coming. There's a lot of other good talks. How about a hand for Stan? All right, check out In Kitchen YouTube channel. And blog with Stan will have a column pretty soon coming up.
Indeed. And thank you to the sponsors, Emerald Hirsch, Los Angeles Apparel, and Stalls Transfer Express.